Hey everybody, CVM here, back with BBD for the deck tech on the black-white mid-range deck. This is based off of the original deck that Paul Reitzel top-8'd the Pro Tour with, and Patrick Chapin got 9th, I believe.
Yeah, they had like a combined finish of like 7.5. Pretty mediocre.
Pretty mediocre. The deck performed very well for them, and there was some talk leading up to this last weekend about changing around some of the cards, namely like Banisher Priest in the main, and Dave Dilburn, who's top-8'd a few Star City Opens, recently got second in Seattle with this deck, and I think it's very interesting. So it's similar to the Mono Black Devotion deck, where we have like the Thought Seizes and the Hero's Downfalls, just two of the best cards in the format.
Yep.
Along with some other spot removal, but we also have a lot of white cards to give us some early games. So as opposed to just relying on one-for-one removal spells, we're going to use our efficient creatures to pressure our opponent, and then let the removal spells finish out the game as we kill them. So we get Soldier of the Pantheon and Precinct Captain, which are both very good on offense and defense, which is very important for this deck. So Soldier of the Pantheon can attack through just about anything in the format and can block just about anything in the format, which is very good and allows us to play whatever game we need to based off of the texture of our hand. And Precinct Captain is along the same lines, does the same thing. So it's one of those unique cards that is great on defense, but can pressure your Hallowed Fountain opponents very, very quickly without making you have to overextend your board.
Yeah, Precinct Captain I think is like one of the good cards from Block Constructed that did make its way to Standard as well, where like the idea is like, against like the mono red style decks or like a lot of the aggressive decks, like they can't actually attack through it profitably. And then against like the Revelation decks, it forces a Supreme Verdict by itself.
Yeah. Verdict or Detention Sphere, which either way we're fine with.
Yep.
And now we do have Banisher Priest in the main. So before, I believe they had a couple copies in their sideboard from the Pro Tour deck, but they've opted to move it to the main, and I feel like that is just more of a concession to like the Gruul decks becoming popular. So it can't hit Caryatid, but it can hit like Voyaging Satyr if you need it to, if they have Nykthos shenanigans going. But like all of their top-end creatures are vulnerable to Banisher Priest, so a lot of times they'll just go like Mana Guy into Planeswalker into Big Guy, and then you can just like remove the Big Guy and then kill their Planeswalker with your creatures. So Banisher Priest does a very, very good job at filling that role.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's also kind of cute with Whip of Erebos, where if you need to, just like remove a blocker to attack for the win, you can whip it back into play if you need to. And Whip also works well with Obsidat. So I think you might have some experience with Whip and Obsidat already. That's a very powerful combination.
Yeah, how does it work? I'm not familiar.
I actually do want to go over it because the last time we had the interaction in the video, a lot of people in the comments were confused with what was happening because we didn't really explain it. So the way the interaction works is if you whip an Obsidat back into play from your graveyard, at the beginning of the end step, both the whip and the Obsidat will trigger. And if you stack it so that the Obsidat trigger resolves first, the whip's trigger will actually be sufficed, and Obsidat will be able to return play the next turn under the Obsidat's actual ability. So with the way that whip reads, as long as the Obsidat is exiled, regardless of how it's exiled, the whip will be happy, and then the second half of Obsidat's trigger will be able to resolve the following turn on your upkeep.
Yeah, and it's important to note that when Obsidat does come back the following upkeep, it's a new Obsidat.
Yeah,
it doesn't
it's a
have
new
any
object.
kind of like, if someone tries to kill it, then it'll still go to your graveyard like normal. Like it doesn't have like any kind of whip things attached to it. It broke free of its whip. So
that is correct. It is a new object. So basically, whip makes Obsidat immortal. So it's very difficult to get rid of them once you actually have the combo assembled, which is one of the things that this deck does have going for it. We do have Desecration Demon, who's just a giant 4-mana 6/6 flyer. And it plays very well in decks like this with a lot of removal because eventually they'll run out of dudes to sacrifice, and then you can just hit them with your demon.
And it also plays well with a lot of your early creatures too, because you can use the soldiers and the precincts to pressure them early enough to where they have to start sacking to your demon, and you can also use those creatures to play defense to where you can attack with your demon and not fear like the backlash of them attacking back. So they actually plays very well like in combination with each other. And I also really like the way that like you have like a double white spell in turn 2, a double white spell in turn 3, and then a double black spell in turn 4. It really just plays well as well.
It is all held together by the one, the only Orzhov Guildgate.
Yep.
So again, this is just basically this deck is the Brian Braun doing Relics of Past with Guildgates and Obzidats. But I still think it's very powerful. Also, we get to play Elspeth, which is my favorite Planeswalker. I had a lot of fun with Garrick last week, but I still feel like Elspeth is better and will just continue to get better as the format evolves. And we're playing Read the Bones, so they opted to go with Read the Bones over Underworld Connections. I'm not sure if that's still right or not. Underworld Connections is 100% the answer when you're playing with Grey Merchants, but since we don't really care about the devotion to black, that just it can't be really considered. But I really like the ability to draw just more than 2 cards with Underworld Connections as the game goes along. But Read the Bones is better at finding a specific card for you when you need it in that moment.
Yeah, I think it's possible that Read the Bones is better in this deck for a few reasons. Number one, you're playing 7 planes in a Mutavault, so you're not always going to have like Connections mana available. Secondly, this deck is far more like you don't have the same kind of long game that the black deck has. Yeah. You're a much more mid-rangey deck. Like you have to kind of close the game out around like turn 7 or 8 against a lot of decks, and so you're not going to like have the time to really make Connections active, and you want to just like dig for that Obzat to kill them, or like dig for that Banisher Priest to remove their 1 blocker so you can kill them.
Yeah, it's definitely more of looking for a specific card as opposed to just
looking for more
attaining
cards.
A critical mass of cards. Because like the cards in the black deck, they all do the same thing. They just like kill your opponent's dudes or draw you cards or kill your opponent. So they're very, very streamlined. As far as the mana goes, we get the Scrylands, Temples, good old Orzhov Guildgate, and then 1 Mutavault. I know that from reading Chapin's report about the deck, initially they had 3. First thing Reitzel did was cut 1, and then he talked him into cutting another one. And they wanted to cut the last one, but decided just to keep it in. So it definitely could be replaced with just another colored producer, since we have 1 white, 2 white, 2 white, 2 black, 2 white and 2 black. Just very, very heavy colored mana requirements. But I think that Mutavault is just too good to ignore. So
can we get that 4th Guildgate in there, please? Like I might just have to play the deck if that's the case. Yeah.
Maybe. But that's the main deck. I'm definitely excited for it. I feel like the matchup's pretty even against the black deck, although I am really weak to Pack Rat, so I think Pack Rat is just gonna beat me pretty handedly. Although I will say that if you ever happen to make them 4/4s, Elspeth will come down and do her thing.
Ooh, yeah, it is pretty dirty.
So let's go ahead and take a look at the sideboard and see what kind of options we have for what our opponents might have. All right, everybody, here we are with the sideboard for the black-white mid-range deck. We do have a couple one-ofs here. We have a second Elspeth, which I think is fine. Honestly, you probably could have 2 in the main deck. The 4th Banisher Priest, again, those Gruul decks really have no way to kill it, and it's just a great card against them. Blood Baron of Vizkopa, which I think is going to rise in popularity as we move forward. Like the black deck just dominated the last Grand Prix. It's pretty soft to this card, and
it's not.
You can beat it, but it's a very, very good card.
It is a good
against
card,
the deck, and I think that people are just going to start playing it more and more. It's been rising in popularity even before this last Grand Prix. As you can see from the price of it, just continues to go up. Usually, you'll find that you can determine how popular a mythic is by how fast its price is increasing, because the demand is just always out there for it, and this is just one of those cards. Fiendslayer Paladin, I also think, is going to be very good as we move forward in the format. There are a lot of very powerful 1-for-1 removal spells, and he basically dodges all of them. And if you can remove their creatures and just attack every turn with a Fiendslayer Paladin, eventually your opponent's going to die. So that could be a viable strategy.
Yeah, it's a great card against like the aggressive like red decks and stuff too, which can otherwise be a big problem for decks like this.
Definitely, like we're wanting to play a mid-range game, convert some life into cards, and then Burning Tree Emissary is just going to poop all over us. So
Yep.
Fiendslayer Paladin is a good card against that. Sin Collector for the Sphinx's Revelation decks. This deck has opted to not play Duress because we have access to a second color with Sin Collector. I think that's fine. Like we don't have Underworld connections, so we aren't as aggressively trying to get their Detention Spheres out of their hand as like the mono black deck is. And Sin Collector can put pressure on and strip the Sphinx's Revelation from their hands.
Yeah, like I will say that I've honestly been kind of unimpressed with Sin Collector for the most part, but I will say that it is the best threat against the actual Sphinx's Revelation decks because like the body is relevant there.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do care about those decks, like if that's the primary reason you want to play that effect in your board, then I can see Sin Collector. But if you want like some sort of a card against like the black decks and stuff as well, I would just go with Duress because you want to strip like connections and like planeswalkers and whips and things like that. So.
Yep. Next we have Lifebane Zombie, again very good against the Gruul decks. I can take their Pulk Praenos or Arbor Colossus, and is good at killing Xenagos. We also have a Dark Betrayal to kill Pack Rats, other Obsidats. It also hits Nightveil Spectre, which could be relevant because there isn't a lot of removal spells that do actually hit Nightveil Spectre. And then we have an Ultimate Price, which is a removal spell that does not hit Nightveil Spectre, but it does kill Desecration Demon. Hey, and so does Dark Betrayal. It's getting better and better the more I think about it.
Unfortunately, neither of those cards kill Mutavault.
That is correct. Neither of them kill Mutavault. That's a good point. Mutavault's pretty good.
It is pretty sweet.
Nice reprint, Wizards. So there we have the sideboard for us. We have some interesting cards. A lot of creatures, actually, now that I look at it. Actually, not surprised that Paul Wrights will like the deck. So there we have it. Let's go ahead and get to battling and see if I can defend myself against the Grand Prix champion.